This is from chairperson via Skype. Hey, Mahlatse, thank you very much indeed for your time. I want to borrow from media correspondent Brian Stout, I'm sure you know him, and tweak one of his quotes for our audience and maybe just put it to you. Would you agree that press freedom is actually about ensuring the freedom of every South African citizen?
Yes, definitely, because if you remember, what the media does is basically be the conduit of information between those in power and society. Journalists, when they stand in front of politicians, they are asking questions on behalf of communities and individuals who might not have the access immediately, but also they are the ones that are basically helping to hold those in power accountable. They ask the difficult questions, and that is why the media plays such an important role to fulfill that right for South Africans to know how their country is governed, how their money is being spent, and basically to ask and ensure that in between elections there is accountability from politicians and those in power.
Look, it's all about giving our viewer, our listener, our reader all the information they need to make up their own mind. But here's the big question, Mahlatse. Are journalists trusted in South Africa?
We have seen a decline in the trust relationship between the media and the South African public, which is, of course, very, very worrying. I mean, we come from an era where, for example, the public broadcaster would be, I think, the most trusted institution after religious institutions. And that is where you would want a public broadcaster to be. And that was in the early days of our democracy. But the decline we have seen across the board. And we think that the reasons for that are there are quite a few. Part of it, we think that remember the Bell Pottinger campaign that was run. It was quite intense. And if you listen now, even in the terminology that is still being used, it's remnants of that Bell Pottinger campaign. And it was very clear. It was very well resourced. It had deep pockets to basically create that mistrust between the media and the public. And in part, we think it was actually successful. There are also internal challenges that the media has faced. We know that some publications have had to apologize for some major big stories where they've actually erred, and that also contributes to decline in trust with the media. So it's a combination of factors, but part of why we as the South African National Editors Forum are going to be launching an inquiry, a media inquiry, is exactly that, to be able to rebuild that relationship between the public and the media because of the important role that it plays.
Yeah, that's a big one. I mean, if you don't have the trust of your audience, then your job is defeated, basically. But talk to us about the gains, Mahlatse, that have been made over the past 25 years. We celebrate 25 years of democracy here in South Africa. What are some of the gains?
Look, the gains that we have is that, there's a multiplicity of voices just in terms of the different publications, the different television channels, the different radio stations that are out there. The growth of community media, especially the radio stations, has also been great over the past few years. But as much as we celebrate, there are things that do actually worry us. We were looking at the World Press Freedom Index that was released ahead of today, and it's basically put South Africa under satisfactory category, and this is a category below good, and good is where we want to be 25 years into our democracy, because that says that we tick all of the right boxes. And we think part of the reasons why we are not in that good category is because we've seen this onslaught or these attacks on the media by political parties, political leaders themselves attacking the media. We have seen with the ANC calling the writer of that book on the ANC Secretary General, Ace Magashule, Stratcom Media. We have seen the publishing of Karima Brown's cell phone number and all of those attacks that followed. Julius Malema himself attacking the media earlier on, forcing us to go to the Equality Court. We've seen a member of parliament in Floyd Shivambo attacking a journalist on the parliamentary precinct. So there are quite worrying trends, even though we do have a lot to celebrate. We are one of those few countries on the continent where the freedom of the media is protected in our constitution. It is there in the Bill of Rights. The reason why we are not lower on is because we know in many parts of the continent, journalists disappear, journalists are murdered, journalists are jailed. So there is parts to celebrate, but we think that 25 years into our democracy, we should be consolidating media freedom. We should not be having talks of a media appeals tribunal anymore.
This freedom should no doubt be celebrated. But make no doubt about it, Mahlatse, freedoms can be abused, you would agree. The same freedom can also enable disinformation, misinformation, fake news. I know the latter phase is a big irritation to journalists because the very nature of news can't be fake. But whatever you want to call it, the point being, the right to freedom of the press and the right to freedom of expression comes with huge responsibilities.
Huge responsibility and accountability as well. Remember, if you are a broadcaster, you still have the Broadcasting Complaints Commission that can hold you accountable, that ordinary people can actually go and lay complaints. And we have seen them ruling against media houses for not exercising that responsibility. We have the Press Council, which includes print media and also digital platforms. So there are institutions that actually hold the media accountable, and we continue to encourage members of the public to use those platforms. But we also have to be clear, Blaine. I mean, the issue of misinformation and disinformation doesn't always come to those formal media structures. It is actually the platforms that are outside, the information that is spread via WhatsApp, the information that is spread via Facebook. And that is why we have launched this, the Real 411 website together with Media Monitoring Africa and the IEC, because misinformation is usually spread by those outlets and not necessarily media houses, because there you can actually hold them accountable and they can actually be punished for it. And part of that is when people lose trust in your publication or in your outlet, and that's when you lose the numbers, and the consequences are felt across the board.
Yeah, facts needs to be verifiable. I guess the rule is to check, double check and triple check and then share it. Mahlatse Mahlase, thank you very much indeed for your time. She's the South African Editors Forum chairperson.